Goeiemorgen mense. Nice chilly morning today. We got down to 0 on the stoep last night. I think you Joburg guys would have seen -2 or even -3. Sorry for you. For me, not too bad. I had a bit of frost on the lawn this morning. The first time that I realized it, but I was too cold and felt like snuggling in my bed, so I didn't film any of it. But today's video is not about grass. I'm going to give you a little bit of a show and tell on my mower Frankenstein. Yesterday I did a little upgrade to the front roller. More like a sideways grade. I actually put back on its old roller, which is a nice heavy steel roller as opposed to the aluminium one with the plastic end caps. I had it machined, stuck new bearings into it, and I put a dual height adjustment kit onto the front. So we'll go and cut to the footage of that quick, show you how I got that on and what I did surrounding that, and then I'll give you a little bit of a show and tell front to back on Frankenstein. And then you'll get to see why I call him Frankenstein. Check that out. Had the steel end caps remachined, and now they are housing new bearings. So we get an old roller doing new things. And also got myself a second height adjuster and the little kit so that I can make this a dual height adjustment machine as well. Alright, battery died without me noticing, so I've finished all of this. I've got both sides in, they've been adjusted. We've stuck to 16 mils, as you would have seen there earlier, I think. And what I did as well was I just took the opportunity to loosen up the cylinder bearing housings, the assemblies. So basically lifted the cutting cylinder away from the bottom blade, brought it back down again and readjusted it absolutely perfectly. What's pretty good about this scenario, since the last back lap, I haven't had to adjust the cylinder to the bed knife once. And only now I decided to open it up, get all these parts back together. I had to loosen them up anyway to get this old front roller assembly out first, which I've now put back together with the dual height adjusters instead of that assembly in the front. So now left to right is perfect, as perfect as what it can be. And then these housings, everything now has been tightened back up. Cylinder is still rotating freely. I just don't want this thing to fall off. Let me show you quick. That's how a cutting cylinder should be able to move. Barely hearing anything against the bottom blade. And just the tension from your chains is what slows the thing down. That's it. So let's have a look at how it cuts quick. Perfect. Definitely. That's how it must be. Look at that. I love that mower. Frankenstein. I suppose you could call it the beauty and the beast. So let's take a closer look. Alright, so starting from the front, you can see my Aussie Lawn swag. Thanks, Brenton. That was given to me a while back. I think I already said thanks for that, but I'll just say thanks again. So as you can see from the front, the catcher is a Protea catcher. A lot of guys may have assumed that many of these components would have been Scott Bonnar components because Protea many years ago bought the rights for Scott Bonnar to build their machines, and some of these machines like the SIs were derived from that, but they've since changed quite a bit. So this catcher is a bit more rounded, as you can tell, a little bit different to the Scott Bonnar, actually quite a bit different, and I've done a few more things to make it a bit more user-friendly in time, like added little anti-vibration mounts and so on. Alright, so just starting from the front, you can see, and what you just saw earlier on is that I put back on the very heavy front roller. This roller is 2.5 times heavier than what the previous one was, at least, and now I've added the dual height adjustment kit to the front, so it's no longer a solid assembly that runs all the way across the unit and you adjust from one side, because remember, if that thing bends, or even if it doesn't bend, sometimes it just kind of droops more towards the one side, and that's, you know, essentially going to mean that you're cutting a little bit lower or higher on one or the other side, which is a bit of a nuisance. So now Frankenstein never had that problem, fortunately, because it was old and sturdy, but I've now added this in anyway just to give Frankenstein a bit of an upgrade, and these parts were accessible because of me doing another machine renovation. I managed to absorb some parts. Just having a closer look at the new height adjusters. These little assemblies here allow me to add the front roller scraper as well as the teasing brush later on, so I've left myself room for a couple more upgrades in time as well. And you can see I stuck with the standard plastic height adjustment knobs, because if I convert, or at least if I wanted to convert this over to the click knobs, which is a great idea, I would have to change these side plates, which I'm not in the mood for. So the side panels stay, and I just put in these guys, and then I've still got the same effect. So these now I've got proper dual adjustment, nice clean accurate height of cut from left to right, and I've got room for the steel, and I've got room for the teasing brush. Right, and then moving on to the cutting cylinder, you can see I stuck with the original 8 blade. I had it reground, it's still running true. It was Imperial. I've now made all the components work for the new metric upgrades and the additions that I would have changed over to. So I'm going to stick with this 8 blade for as long as possible. Remember, there's no point in changing to something like a 9 or a 12 blade just willy-nilly, because it's not going to give you a cleaner cut. It's all dependent on your type of grass and what height of cut that specific grass is at. That density, how the grass is, or how the blade hits the grass, and how it gathers whilst it's busy cutting, that's the thing that's going to determine your quality of cut. So don't just think by moving to a higher blade count that you're going to win or get a better performance. It's not just about the number of blades. And you can see here I did change. I used to have the original Scott Bonnar bearing housing, but the one side was broken, so luckily with the new side plates we just made some little hole adjustments, in particular for the rear roller, but I'll get to that in a sec. And I put in the domestic mower bearing housings, the assemblies. I might move that over to the greens mower at some point in time, but for now I'm very happy with this, and those guys are proper sturdy. I think I would have said earlier on, from the last backlap, which I think was about 2 months ago, I haven't had to adjust the cutting cylinder to bend knife once again since then. Not once. So this guy stayed stable and perfectly sharp until I decided to strip some things to get the front roller assembly out yesterday. That's very good. Alright, then moving on to the side panels. These are not the original side panels. I actually had Rudolf the gardener. He originally wanted to donate me some parts, so he donated the other roller that I used here and the side panels to me, and I felt so bad for the donation that eventually I ended up giving him some free fertilizer, so it kind of meant more of a swap than a donation, but his heart was in it to give me some panels, some side panels, because he had been working on a bunch of projects and he had them left over, and that is what lent me the opportunity to put on the dual height adjuster. So thank you, Rudy. And then just moving on to this side, you can actually see the side chain cover is now a new one. I had the original Protea one where it was a pressed side chain cover, but it was heavily damaged and I had to replace it, and then I replaced it with this. I just got the side chain cover raw, and that's why it's spray painted white. I just stuck something on there to make sure there's a primer and a paint on it to make sure that it doesn't rust while I'm busy trying to figure out what color I might want to make this beast at some point in time. But you know, colors, you've got to think about them carefully before doing it. I don't feel like stripping the machine, getting it sprayed and then not liking it. And then just the last thing for the side chain cover was that I added the rubber gasket as well, just to bring it up to date. And it does help with a little bit of, well, preventing some of the dust and crap that gets in there when mowing. So at least now my chains stay nice and clean 99% of the time. There's a lot less cleanup that happens on the inside of that chain cover. And then I almost forgot the chain tensioner. I put in the new auto tensioner just to make life easier. It's a lot better to work with this. So even though I took out the original one, this is going to give the machine much better longevity, and things stay cleaner in here for longer, and I don't have to worry about the chain giving me grief that I've got to readjust every now and then. This guy's just doing it on its own. So that's a nice little upgrade. Just moving over to the clutch, you can see I'm still using the friction clutch, and I'm happy to stay like this. It is very nice to be able to disarm or disable that cutting cylinder when you just want to let the engine continue running. Just from a safety perspective alone, that is a very, very helpful feature to have. But from a convenience point of view, it's very nice for me to just be able to leave the engine running. I don't need to decelerate at all. I just disable the cutting cylinder. I can take off the bin, I can work with the machine, and know that for whatever reason something isn't going to happen here where the engine gained RPM and the machine just fires back up again. So I quite like this, and I'm going to stick with it as long as possible, and I'll keep repairing and maintaining to make sure that this guy runs nicely over time. But all the housings, those are still original up here. I just replaced all the bearings when I redid the machine. And then just moving on to the engine, this is one of the newer Robin EY20s. It had it didn't actually have any recoil starter on here, so I just bought a little cheapie, replaced that, and it was seized when I bought it. And I took a chance, I stripped the engine, and I literally cleaned everything from top to bottom. I pulled it down to the absolute last component, and I scrubbed and cleaned until this thing got back into the condition that it is now. I did have some trouble getting it running again, but a little bit of perseverance, a little bit of fire, a little bit of fuel, a little bit of air, and she runs. And that's basically that. So this guy has been so good to me ever since. I had to do a lot of work on the carburetor. I didn't take any chances with that. It was also completely stripped. And as far as the engine goes, I only had to replace the fuel cock. At the time, I couldn't get, you can see this is a different air filter. I have the original filter, but I couldn't find the replacement filters for in it. And so what I did is I just bought this little cheapy Chinese knockoff here for the Robin engine. The carb's still brand new, so the fuel cock is a Chinese knockoff. You can feel it is a little bit weaker, but it's doing the job. And then this guy's also done the job. I just got to make sure I keep it clean. The original one, and the way that it sits, you had to clean it a lot less often, but it was so stuffed that I just had to move in this direction. So at some point in time, and I do now have access to those parts nice and cheaply, I will put back on the original one. But I kind of like the way that looks, so I might not. Who knows? Let's see. Now the drive clutch is still the same. It's just been improved over time. And this guy's still running perfectly, so I've got no hassle with that. I've still got the bent handlebars. What Protea have done nowadays is I've got the straight ones. I quite like this, and I like the straight ones. I think I might move this over to the straight at some point in time, or at least I thought that. But as I've been, well, let's say Frankenstein's been growing on me more and more by the day, I think that I'm going to only do Frankenstein renovations to the point that they are absolutely worth it. Not just change parts because I feel like changing parts. They've got to be something completely beneficial. Well, I suppose I shouldn't say just beneficial, but it needs to be any of the upgrades need to be as beneficial as possible whilst maintaining the sort of the original state of the machine as much as possible. So even though I've given it like a dual height adjustment upgrade, those are just upgrades, but the original foundation, the base of the machine, is going to be the same for as long as possible. So I'm not going to go and change like the rear roller, for example. I'll show that to you in a sec, etc. I don't want to change the clutch for the reasons that I've already given you, and that also keeps it more original. You can tell that is a Protea SI510. It's not a Scott Bonnar, although this really came off of those Scott Bonnar designs back in those days. So these are the first machines. Well, this was one of the first from those production runs. It really is one of a kind. And then lastly, if we have a look at that rear roller, you can see I kept the original bearing housings that are pretty much the Scott Bonnar ones. I just changed the actual bearings and I re-drilled the side panels to accommodate. And then I've got one of few, there are very few of these left, and that's the triple split rear roller. So it's not just a dual rear roller, which means that I've got much more control and stability, far less chance that would rip up fine turfs. So even though this is technically still a domestic mower, it's as close to a proper greens mower as what you can get, and I won't be able to replace that with a new one being much more beneficial than this at all. That is brilliant, and it's crazy heavy, and now with my front roller being crazy heavy as well, it balances slightly better again. So this machine, man, I'm just so happy with it. Alright, and then apart from a few small things that I've chosen to exclude, that's pretty much Frankenstein. It was just a really old, battered up mower. I'll try and put in some of the old video clips and that kind of thing, or photos or whatever, when I bought the machine. I didn't really film upgrading the machine because it was such a mission of a job. There was lots of panel beating and lots of work, lots of little things. It wasn't just like stripping a machine and then reassembling it after it was repainted, like a lot of the other videos that I see. It was hard graft, so I didn't record it because it was just too much effort. But yeah, I'm really proud of this little mower. It's as original as what it can be, and yeah, over time I may do some upgrades, being the front roller scraper if I feel I need to, the teasing brush, but I might want to make some adjustments for that. I really would like to get the proper greens mowers cutting cylinder bearing assemblies put in. And I think that's just about that. I'm not going to change that rear roller. I'm going to try not to change the clutch ever. There are still enough parts for me to make that thing work for as long as possible. Maybe I'll get a new engine at some point in time, but right now that guy's running perfectly, so why change it? I mean, it's barely even got a dent or a couple of scratches on it. I mean, it's like these kinds of scuff marks, but I don't think there's even a dent on this. It looked much worse when I bought it. And that's that. So I think I'll leave the video at that. That's most likely longer than I even anticipated it to be. But yeah, there you go. A little tour of Frankenstein. If you've got any questions and queries, let me know. I am a Protea online retailer. So if you want a new machine and you want some info about the machines, I'll stick a link in the description. You can go check them out on backyardbushveld.co.za. Any other questions and queries, just also get onto backyardbushveld.co.za and send me an email. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, share this with your buddies. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.